I want to bring in Alexandria Kazarian, senior trial attorney at Garagos and Garagos, friend of the show. Good to see you so much. I imagine you wouldn't have recommended that he do an interview just days before the trial, right? Why? What do you make of that? Is that going to hurt him?
Yeah, I don't think that was a good idea at all, especially if there is any kind of evidence that could link him to Nevada. It's going to torpedo any kind of credibility that he has. But I think it's a really weak case in general. I agree with the defense that you cannot be holding someone accountable for a murder based on their statements alone. I mean, that in itself is
You
law.
can? I mean, isn't that almost an alleged confession?
Sure, it could be called a confession, but I could write a book saying that I killed JFK, and that doesn't mean that it's true. Just because I write a book or I give an interview saying that I committed a crime does not give you enough evidence to convict me of it. There has to be independent, credible evidence that I was actually there and that I actually had the intent to kill somebody and that I participated in that crime. And so his statements alone can't be enough.
Do you also think what do you think the prosecution is going to do to make that connective tissue? It wasn't just that he made these statements. I'm assuming they're going to have more to put him in Nevada and say that he was affiliated with these individuals, that he was in that car. What do you anticipate from the prosecution?
Well, so far they have statements from people who weren't there who say that people who were there but have passed away told them corroborating evidence, that they said that he secured the gun, that he handed the gun to somebody in the car who actually did the shooting, that he was in the car, that there were conversations about it, that he was a part of. And so for a conspiracy theory, if there's evidence that a defendant was involved in a decision to commit a crime, and for a murder, if they can prove that he had the intent for that killing to happen and participated, then he could be charged. But the problem is, the witnesses that they're using the statements from were not there. The people who said these things to the witness are dead. So there's no way to cross-examine them. There's no way to know whether they're credible. And really the entire defense is he wrote a whole book about it. Why would he lie in a book?
Yeah, no, you just heard him right there. I guess here's something to note. And I think it was in 2008 that he gave this proffer agreement, right, where it allowed him to share some information about a crime, wouldn't be prosecuted for it. Why doesn't that protect him now?
So it should, because there was a government promise that anything that he said wouldn't be used against him. Their argument is after that statement, he then went out on his own and gave these statements to the news, in the book, and so he basically invalidated the government's promise. But that doesn't hold water. If there was a promise by the government not to use that information to prosecute him, the government has to abide by that. But if there's independent evidence besides his statement, then theoretically they could prosecute him. But here, they're actually being allowed to use that statement itself as evidence. I don't agree with.
Think it's going to be tough to find a jury? Who doesn't know about Tupac?
Yeah, but you're never going to find a jury that doesn't know anything about the case.
Right.
The idea is getting a jury that knows about it but can still be fair and listen to all the evidence before they make a decision. Can that happen? We'll see.
Who do you want on the defense? Who would the defense want on the jury?
On the jury, I mean, you want people that are honest. You want people that will come in and say, yes, I have heard about it and I understand the rules of evidence. And even though I have a suspicion that he might be guilty, I'm willing to put that to the side. I never want a juror that comes in and says, nope, I don't know anything about this. I've never heard of Tupac. Sure, I could be fair. That person's lying. So you want somebody that is at least honest about how they feel about that case. I don't know if you want people who are really involved in hip hop or not. Actually, I think in this case you do, because I think there's so many conspiracy theories.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.